So you're still here.
Yes, I am.
So today we're going to speak about the nature of the soul and the idea of pure awareness, undifferentiated consciousness, and Eastern spirituality. So, which, they both differ a lot to Western philosophy and Western religions. And a lot of people, I think, bring the idea of the Western concept of the soul over into Eastern spirituality, which is very strange. But you can understand that. But the soul is very difficult to understand in Eastern spirituality. It's not so easy as, like, for example, in Christianity, we talk of our soul, and if you've got a pure soul, then you go to heaven at death and this and that. And that sort of like concept of heaven, and that doesn't really exist in Eastern spirituality. We have Vaikuntha and we have all of these heavenly abodes in Eastern spirituality, but they all belong to, Brahman, or it's the level of Brahman, or Vaikuntha is like the abode of Vishnu, and you have the Pure Land in Buddhism, and you have all of these transcendental spheres, you could say, or dimensions. But it's not about that you have an individual soul and you go to some sort of heaven after death. The idea in Eastern spirituality, as you and I know, is that heaven is a transcendent reality in the present moment, right here and right now, is where heaven, to use that term, exists. So this idea that you're going to purify your soul, you have no sins, and this and that doesn't really exist in Eastern spirituality. It makes it much more complex for, I think, a lot of Westerners to understand if you're not familiar with the terminology in Eastern spirituality.
But there is terminology called jiva in Hinduism. Where does that sit?
Well, that sits, it's a good point, because jiva is very important to understand when we talk about the soul, because jiva is the individual persona system. You have a jiva, I have a jiva, everyone listening has a jiva. And there needs to be a differentiation between the jiva and the Atman. So the Atman is undifferentiated consciousness, that which is connected to Brahman. And Brahman being the ultimate reality, that mind space, that transcendental non-dual place, which is identical actually with Shunyata and Shunyata in Buddhism and Tao and Taoism, and which I'll talk about in a bit. But relating that to the jiva is that we have this jiva, and this jiva lives life to life to life to life. If you want to believe in reincarnation, you don't have to believe in that, but from an Eastern spiritual perspective, you need to believe in reincarnation. And that jiva accumulates karma, so accumulates the results of its actions in its life, which affects its vasanas, its tendencies and habits, or habitual tendencies, or habitual ways, I should say. And then that goes into the storehouse, which we would call the samskaras, so the mental impressions and the subliminal psychological imprints that we all accumulate straight away from birth. Like, this is why people can have trauma when they're a child, even before they're conscious, but that stays with them. Like, say, for example, if a 3-year-old is abused, then
that traumatic experience stays within
the samskaras. Yeah. And then that will affect how that being acts in the world going forward. This is why a lot of people, through life, will suffer from traumatic experiences when they were younger, because they had those experiences, and then those experiences begin to continue to inform their reality going forward. It doesn't have to be that way, obviously, when you do a lot of sadhana and spiritual work and psychological work, but you have to really understand this jiva to get to that level. And this jiva is the accumulation of those 3 components, that karma, the unconscious actions element, the vasanas, the latent tendencies and habitual ways, and samskaras, the subliminal imprints, mental impressions and subliminal psychological imprints. And so they are what build the jiva. And then the thing is that the jiva then we all begin to act from that place, and that eclipses the Atman. So that's the thing. We all have the Atman within us. We're all pure. We are they're identical with the state of Naguna Brahman. So we are like qualityless, characterless, pure bliss. That's our nature, Satchidananda. You know what I mean? But the jiva eclipses that. And then when we have a firm belief in our identity, that even makes the jiva even stronger within inside you, because then you begin to you have that belief in yourself, and all you're doing is really just burping up the subconscious, and that becomes your reality. Like, that's how you experience the world, because the samskaras are informing your vasanas, and your vasanas are informing your karma, your action. And in turn, how we experience life begins to inform it in the reverse. So when you have a lot of experiences, you're acting a certain way and this and that, that's training your habits and your tendencies, and which is then embedding things into your subconscious that may not be healthy for you. Again, you can do things in your life that will put harmonious dispositions within the subconscious, or the samskaras, which will make you become a virtuous person. But a lot of the time, we're not many of us are working on that plane of existence. We're working just on, we're out there, we're go-getters, and we're going through life unconsciously, which continues to solidify the jiva. And so when you're solidifying that jiva, when you come to our physical death, what lives on is the vasanas and the samskaras, which will continue to inform your karma in your next life. So when they say you're here to live out your karma, you hear this a lot in Buddhism and Hinduism, even in Taoism a little bit too, is that your karmic stock is wound up in your samskaras. So that karmic stock that you've accumulated in your life is going to play out in the next life. It doesn't mean that you're going to be the same sort of person. This is a big difference between Western spirituality and philosophy as opposed to Eastern spirituality and philosophy, because the idea of you as Guy Young, as this person, you could be completely different in your next life, but those habits and tendencies that you have, those vasanas, will play out in a different form. So the jiva then is, you would say in spirituality, in Eastern spirituality, jiva is the soul in the East. The idea of the soul, like, as in similar to Western religion and philosophy. But when you're talking about the Atman, you're talking about something completely different. Yeah. And I think that not people who are schooled in Eastern spirituality, but a lot of people who are casuals think that the Atman or Buddha nature and this and that is the soul, and it's not really the soul,
Yeah, jiva is more individual soul.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. You could say jivatman. Jivatman is a term of, that's basically our existence is jivatman. We're a individual soul encased in the greater totality, the universal soul. You could call the Atman the universal soul, right? But it's not really doesn't have, well, characteristic as far as we know. It's an undifferentiated place where jiva is a differentiated consciousness.
Yeah.
It's a subjective view of reality.
Yeah, what's confusing in Buddhism is that in Buddhism, Atman is individual soul. They consider as an individual soul, therefore they don't acknowledge Atman. And why is it like?
Yeah, well, that's because the anatman, what they term as a non-self. See, this is the difference things with where terminology and that gets kind of skewed through philosophy. Like you will hear the Dalai Lama, he will mention the Atman as like some sort of individual soul, and this is an incorrect, actually, interpretation. And I know he's not a Hindu, so you can forgive him for that, you know what I mean? But he is someone who is somewhat schooled in some Eastern spirituality, so in other schools, I mean, apart from Tibetan Buddhism, but you would think that he would know. But, there is a lot of that sort of general understanding, not just within those spheres of Buddhism, but also within the West as well, like they think that Atman means individual soul. It doesn't. And that comes back to their perspective. So their perspective, the interpretation of that with Buddhism comes from, as I mentioned, Anatman, because Anatman is non-self. So Anatman is that, this is the irony, that the same mind space is characterized and defined differently, but it's the same. And that comes back to your interpretation. Maybe some people were schooled in certain schools of philosophy and that's how they interpret it, or that's just how they interpret it because that was their perspective of the world. And there's a lot of extensive studies on this. Like if you study Shankara, Nagarjuna, you study Patanjali, you study all Mahavira, you study all these great sages of that time, and you see why you can find why their philosophies are similar. But you can also see why they interpret it differently. Like they had different perspectives, So you have, for example, like if we look at yoga and Sankhya, which are strict dualism. You have Purusha, you have Prakriti, and they're not any way related. You have a strict dualism, but what we're describing there, this is why when people talk Advaita Vedanta and they talk yoga, they relate Purusha and Atman all the time, because they're speaking of the same thing. It's kind of funny because it's like when Swami Sarvapriyananda was at Harvard and he was talking to one of those Tibetan lamas, and the Tibetan lama asked him like what tradition he's from and blah blah blah, and then the Tibetan lama said, it's all the same thing anyway, because they were talking about Shunyata, Brahman, and they're different interpretations. Like, for example, you have Buddhism in general have like a modal view of reality, where Advaita Vedanta or Vedanta have a substance view. Like, so there's all substance or there's nothingness on the other side, And from all, especially cognitive science research, and also just from when you study the classics and you understand what they're talking about, that mind space is the same, but just interpreted through different lens, So the Advaitins, again, it's a non-dual state. This is how non-dualism can be within Sankhya and yoga as well, because they're talking when they talk pure awareness, they're talking about something that's undifferentiated. But then again, it comes back to that. They think that the world is real. Now, I'm not saying the world's not real, but their idea is the world is real. So they have then a dualistic model. If we look at it differently if we look at Advaita doesn't think the world is real. Well, not real not as real as we think it is. And so they have much more of a non-dual perspective of reality. And then if you look at Taoism saying duality is real and non-duality is real. So it's all real, and you need to develop some sort of wholeness. And I'd say that wholeness, and that is kind of similar to nirvana or samadhi, is a state of consciousness where you're completely whole and you experience reality as one. So that's that's how they can be different, because you have that non-self in Buddhism, but that non-self of saying, I don't exist, there is no person at the end of this tunnel, it's the same as Advaita Vedanta, same as because the experience of Atman is complete emptiness, complete nothingness. But I think that the way that they interpret Ananda or bliss is different, because maybe because the Hinduism has such a connection with gods and so forth, they have a resonance with, maybe this is related to Shiva or Vishnu or Brahma, whereas in Buddhism there is no god per se, you know what I mean? So But they're real tiny differences when you understand the philosophy, both philosophies, and even Taoism. You know, so
Yeah, they named it Atman, but it really means an Atman. That's what they're really talking about. And then in Buddhism, they say sunyata, and the state of sunyata is same as the undifferentiated consciousness.
exactly.
That state of mind. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And there should be no, like, when you understand this, the only reason why people get annoyed when you say that there's no difference with those is because they have a doctrinal perspective, or they are from a certain tradition, and usually it's the individuals who are from a certain tradition who haven't been part of that tradition for so long. Say, for example, Swami Sarvapriyananda, who's been in the Vedanta order forever and a day, and then that other Tibetan Lama, they are okay to speak like that because they're completely they're at a level of consciousness that they can understand that. Whereas some people who become new to an order or some sort of guru will have a very strict perspective of what they think. You know, you see this a lot in yoga, where people will have like a strict perspective of dualism, but then when you bring in ideas that Purusha is a non-dual experience, then they can kind of comprehend it, but they are caught in the veil of that, you know, that it's not a non-dual system, you know.
I guess we get lost in terminology a lot because it gets very abstract, and when we compare with a different religion and different wisdom traditions, there's a lot of concepts that's overlapping, and which is causing a lot of confusion in a lot of people. So people tend to stick to certain terminology under certain wisdom tradition, but in the end, it's not really like that. It's not just this is that and that's that. It's when it comes to the bottom of the wisdom tradition of all, it actually they all connected.
Yep.
So it's kind of absurd that if we just stuck to one meaning of one terminology, and but because we get lost in this naming things. So we like to name things, so it's sometimes get very confused.
Nama rupa, name and form.
Yes, that's it.
We're often stuck on that level, and that's a core point in also Buddhism, where you actually have to get beyond that. But then you see a lot of Buddhists who are attached to the concepts and the interpretations, you know. But as you know, they're usually the enlightened yogi or Buddha or whoever is up in the mountains, and they've gone completely beyond all conceptual framework. And that's one of the things that Eastern philosophy, Eastern spirituality teaches people beautifully, is that, when you come into this, you don't know so much. And so here's some sort of roadmap to understand it, but then eventually, once you get to know the terrain, you can just throw the roadmap away. That's the idea. And this is why Taoism especially was very cautious of creating concepts and having certain philosophies. That's why Lao Tzu and Zhuangzi always poked fun at certain philosophies and this and that. And that's why even when you read something like the Hua Hu Qing, the later teachings of Lao Tzu, he talks about to the prince about, you know, if you're stuck to images and concepts and this and that, like especially from a religious perspective, you'll never reach the higher states of consciousness that all of these Eastern traditions promise to evoke, you know. And so that's not a knock on other religions, but it is an insight into, like, it's an insight for people who are attached to what you were talking about, the name and the form of certain things, you know. We need to go, obviously within all of the traditions, they say you have to go beyond that eventually.
I think eventually, if our understanding gets deeper, that's the stage we're naturally going to get to.
Exactly, yeah.
Going to get over that verbal meanings and forms and things like that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, that's why some of the great teachers, right, they fall into silence. Like when you look at Ramana Maharishi, and he's said to people, my greatest teaching is silence, and that's why he didn't want to talk, but people would always just hang around. And so he thought, well, obviously I got to say something to them, maybe, like, because they're just going to get bored. But like, his understanding was what you just mentioned. It was that he had learned that stuff, right? But he learned in a secluded manner, like he was tucked away in the foothills of Arunachala, but he learned that subtle learning he was learning led him to silence, and then he didn't speak for, I can't remember how long it was, 7 years or something like this. And so, and people couldn't understand it. And then when he would say, the highest teaching is silence, they don't, again, if you haven't had an experience of that, a deep experience, then you wouldn't understand it. So then you obviously have to provide a roadmap to that place, you know. Yeah. So that's why we see in a lot of the great texts, you know, like the Buddha would say you need to fall silent, or Lao Tzu or Zhuangzi would say you need to fall silent, you know, like this is the end result is like a complete tranquility where you've become the physical and psychological evidence of what the tradition promises to evoke, you know. So it is this is why, like, New Agers, they get carried away with this, but this is why people say that you shouldn't be too intellectual. And there is truth to that too, but you also, comparatively, shouldn't be too intuitive. This is what New Age people don't understand. Once you're one or the other, then you're completely out of balance. You know, that's why they speak about, in Taoism, they speak about the integral one, the integral individual is someone who's brought those two in harmony, not this or that, but like are a whole person, are complete. It's kind of similar to the middle way, like you're not going one extreme or the other. You're having a healthy diet of meditation and also study.
Definitely.
But Taoism's kind of not talking about studying this and that, it's talking just about the use of the intellect and the use of the intuitive faculties that we have. So,
yeah, for instance, in classical yoga, if we were to try to understand what Maya is, why they saw reality in dualistic manner, Purusha and Prakriti, and then why is Vedanta talking about non-dual reality, and how do they relate to each other? It's very abstract ideas, but I think it's very necessary to have a thorough understanding of those traditions, because that will give us a very clear idea of how to look at the world, whether that's a materialistic way or abstract way. And when with that understanding, when we compare with, let's say, Taoist philosophy, then the philosophy itself becomes much more clear, and our understanding gets more vivid. So that allows us to have a thorough understanding of reality. Then we are not going to get that sort of understanding through just having intuitive meditation, or just try to intuit things. And when we truly intellectually understand it, and when we get to a stage where we are able to speak about it, then we can say we really know or we understood. But just through intuitive meditation, or just hatha yoga and physical exercise and things like that, it doesn't really give us really nuts and bolts of the whole thing.
No.
So it's very, very important.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the big problem when someone's all intuitive. They have a very flaky or airy-fairy perspective of Eastern spirituality, and you see this within certain New Age circles. And I think a lot of people miss the point when they come to Eastern spirituality, where they think it's some sort of cosmic or universal perspective, and it is, but fundamentally, it's a very realistic and grounded perspective of life. It's very meat and potatoes, so to speak. You know what I mean? It has solid philosophy, but the philosophy is grounded in science as well. It's grounded in a spiritual science and understanding of reality. And I think that people who lean more into just being super intuitive all the time will then have very like sensational ideas of certain philosophies, and they'll talk about certain masters who are doing things, and you know, all levitation, all of this sort of stuff comes in, and all of the siddhis, all of the magical powers, and all of this stuff begins to happen. But when you look at the great texts and you look at the classical sages, none of those individuals were floating in clouds and this and that. You know, there are certain mythological stories based around those sages, but that's for the purpose of myth. You know what I mean? It's the purpose of telling that sage's story through myth, which makes it more meaningful for individuals generation through generation, you know. And I think that what people do is they sometimes will interpret myth as literal, and then you have all of these, you know, fantastic stories that become real, you know. So you and I know from living in India a lot, when we meet sadhus and yogis and so forth and so on, they're very honest and to the ground, you know, like they just live quiet, secluded lives. They're not floating on clouds, and they're not, you know, exploding out of their crown chakra or whatever people talk about these days, you know.
Yeah, that gives people very fantasy kind of ideas. And yeah, like you said, that's not entirely untrue.
No.
It is true, but the problem is just being in that kind of state of mind going to mask a lot of deeper problems. And as we know, Eastern spirituality is about to get our hands dirty. And really, we need to look ourselves a place where we never want to actually look, and we need to acknowledge a lot of our problems and the problems outside as well. It's all about acknowledging these things and try to do something about it. And that cannot be done just be positive and levitate and
star seeds.
Channeling. Those things not going to help entirely in the end.
And a lot of it's not even true. To a lot of it's, again, it's over sensationalism of Eastern philosophy. It's people with no grounding in the traditions, no understanding of it, no ability to, no experience of studying it and practicing meditation for long periods of time. And so they come up with strange and fantastic ideas, you know. But usually those people will come across what you were talking about. They're not working on the deeper level. And so they're only going to continue to be on this level where they're talking about being an enlightened being and thinking they're an enlightened being, and, you know, talking about souls going through lives and like, you're here to, you know, all of this stuff, which can be true. But you're making it too fantastic, and it's too individualistic, you know. And this is a big problem, because Eastern spirituality is not about individualism. It's about the disintegration of the individual, you know.
That channeling and levitating and that sort of special ability, is something that comes with it, on kind of icing on the cake. Like how sages had this supernatural power, and which is not untrue. But practicing spirituality is not about gaining that sort of ability. That's something that comes later.
Yeah, for sure.
And when you really work on yourself and studying philosophy, you won't even pay too much attention to it.
No. Well, we've all heard of the arrogant yogi or these individuals who can do all of these things, but their individual lives are shambles, They're not psychologically sane, and they have all these abilities, and that goes to show that means nothing. And that's why, especially in places like India and China, they say if you do by chance cultivate siddhis or supernatural sort of abilities, that shouldn't be considered as anything too fantastic, because what happens usually when you practice a certain path for a certain amount of time, say if you're practicing Tai Chi or Hatha Yoga or some sort of path like this, that those sorts of abilities can come as sort of just like a marker of your progress in that practice. But again, if you're not working on the deeper level, that those practices should be working on the deeper level. But if you're not orienting your focus into that, on the focus on the deeper level, then these are just going to be circus clown tricks. You become a clown, really, And so what you're getting at is working on that deeper level. And I think a lot of people misunderstand that when we look at the jiva and we look at karma vasanas and samskaras, to get into the subconscious, we have to work on a psychological level. There wasn't a complete negation of psychology in Eastern thought. There's a deep understanding and a way to work through it. So then that when you do iron out those sorts of habits and tendencies that you have about yourself, that once you are free of that, your mind begins to become liberated, and then you're on a higher sphere of consciousness, higher dimension of consciousness, and you see the world as it truly is. You have the insight into reality. And New Age people don't understand that it's not about getting all of these supernatural abilities and to proclaim that you're an enlightened being, whatever that means, but it's about working on the deeper level, working through those vasanas, getting into the samskaras. And you can only get into the samskaras through deep meditation or some sort of deep practice. It can be through Hatha Yoga and Tai Chi. But often getting into that deepest level is through conventional meditation, through stillness meditation or some sort of form of sitting meditation.
We need to touch that subtle side of our consciousness, our mind. And only that way we can access our subconscious world.
Exactly.
And Hatha Yoga or a different type of meditation can get you certain state, but it probably won't get to that deepest level that you should be.
No.
Yeah.
No, it won't. Yeah, but you've got to do all sorts of work. It's like you can be highly skilled. For example, there are highly skilled individuals in Tai Chi, and you would think that they would be on a certain level, but then if you spend any time with them, then you'll see that, geez, they're just as, or they're more mundane than other people, and their mind's riddled in materialism and this and that. It's not the majority, but there are people like that, We know that from experiences in all of these traditions. So everything is a slippery slope. You've got to find that balance. And that's with everything. You see a lot of people these days, they'll take psychedelics and they think that this is going to be the safe haven to their enlightenment and everything. And yes, psychedelics are a powerful path. You can basically bypass years of meditation if you have a proper ceremony. But what you see with a lot of people who have psychedelics is there is a large portion of people who will come back and they're still the same as what they were before. So there are people who have certain aptitudes for all these paths, as we commonly talk about. Like, say, for example, people can get introduced to meditation and they might meditate for 10 years and still be somewhat similar to what they were 10 years before. And there's many reasons for that. And one of them can just be, well, people have certain aptitudes for certain things. maybe their life is oriented towards bike riding or something. That's their form of meditation or something like this. We don't want to put anything up on a pedestal above anything else, but meditation, as what we were saying, getting into that subconscious area is very important, because that gives us that chance to alleviate or expose those samskaras that are shaping our character. And for example, vipassana meditation, getting down to the sensorium, the sensory level, which you get there through anapanasati, through the breath, through the awareness of respiration, and you become conscious of that sensorium, and those senses. The root of those senses are linked to the samskaras. That's what the Buddhist literature talks about, is that sensation you feel, and we feel a lot through our gut when we're experiencing certain things. That's because that's so linked to like your subconscious, your enteric nervous system, like the nervous system of the stomach, of the visceral area, is connected so much to the samskaras. So how do we alleviate that? Well, the teachings of the Buddha say we need to practice vipassana, and he's a pretty high benchmark, so we should always look to individuals like that. Sure, there are other paths, there are other paths. Psychedelics can do that. They can do that, and other systems can, but the most tried and tested has been meditation, through all those great Eastern traditions.
We've seen a lot of cases that people who got treated pretty good with taking ayahuasca and quite regularly, obviously under very well managed way. But that's also for certain people. It's not for everyone. And so it's just like a meditation might not be for everyone, I suppose. But I think I'm not sure. But taking psychedelics can help you going through certain obstacles in your life and psychologically. But also, the reason why meditation also can be great is that you not rely on anything like outside of you. It's purely from your own will and very voluntary work. You volunteer for it, and that means you really want to get into it. And from doing pure awareness meditation, all these experience that you will have during the meditation will be very clear and vivid experience at conscious level, and that helps subconscious elements within yourself to arise in your conscious level. And in that way you can access your subconscious much clearer and without taking any substance. And that's something, I don't know, maybe can be a bit clearer in our mind.
Exactly.
Instead of taking something to be able to do that.
Well, from our experience, most of the individuals that we have known, our friends who have had psychedelics and have had positive experiences with them, have been long-term meditators. And actually after they might have only had one or two experiences, but they will go back to their practice. And one thing you will see with some people who are maybe a bit hippie-ish about psychedelics is they'll have psychedelics in the sense that they might take some other hallucinogen, and then they will go back to their life and nothing's fundamentally transformed because they don't have like a center maybe in their life or a focus of that the work is not done. You know what I mean? Like, for example, like some people think that they're just going to have one psychedelic experience and all the work's going to be done for them, and it's like that's not true at all. You need to it's a long process. You can't just blast out your samskaras with one experience. This is going to be, you might have to be in the jungle for a long time for that to happen. And even shamans in the Amazon will say that you're not going to get to the level that they're at with just a few ceremonies. You're going to have to do this in a long-term manner. That's why one of our friends got offered to do an apprenticeship in the jungle where you're on a vision quest for 18 months and stuff like that. So there are certain elements which also involves not taking a lot of psychedelics. Most of the time not taking psychedelics.
That's right. It's very medicinal.
Yeah. It's very medicinal. So, and in some sense, meditation is medicinal too.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
So it's also a form of subtle therapy as well. The difference is that, well, you pretty much can't take psychedelics all day, but you can meditate for as long as your lower back and your knees aren't going to blow out. So you have that, and I think that, getting back to what we were saying, is that a lot of people are much more centered when they have a certain practice like that keeps them anchored and also keeps them working on that subtle level. Otherwise, you're still out there and you're still like
looking for something
else, like what you were saying. You're seeking something else. You're looking for something else, and meditation is about an understanding that you can't control what's out here. You can never control what's going on in life, but what you can control is what's in here. And you can control that by working on yourself on a deep level and working on that level of trying to get into the samskaras. In Buddhism they talk about the 5 hindrances and all that, and working on that level so that you are much more present in your life and you're not affected by, or I should say overly affected by what's happening in the external world. And that's not to make a sharp distinction between both internal and external, but that's how you should be sort of focused when you are practicing. Because, whatever's going on out here is going to happen, you know what I mean? Like, there will be violence, there will be cheating and stealing. This is going to happen, Yeah,
as long as we keep that center firm, no matter what happens outside, you have that very strong center within you that will prolong your centered mind in the middle of a storm.
Exactly. And that's the difference between authentic Eastern spirituality and the New Age version of Eastern spirituality. Where New Age version of Eastern spirituality it's an external system, and it's about promoting your ego almost to a certain degree. But traditional Eastern philosophy of spirituality is about humbling yourself, coming back within yourself, working on that deep level, and becoming a better person, following the path of peace. And a lot of people don't kind of understand this path of peace that's been promoted within Eastern spirituality. You becoming a peaceful person is what affects the world deeply. We don't need more people who are competitive and more people who are trying to, get ahead of everyone else. We need less of that. And we need more people who are settled in their lives. Not settled to the sense of the mundane, but settled in their lives, settled in their mind, where they're completely content with how their life is because they're happy within themselves, as opposed to what their happiness is not dependent on what they experience or who they're with. And actually the irony of that is that when you're completely in that place, then you can love other things and other people more purely because you don't have an agenda for them. I want this person to acquiesce to my way of thinking because that, that's how I see the world. And if they don't fit in with my picture, then they're off the list, But Eastern spirituality is completely different. It's about an acceptance of how the world is, about letting people, understanding that people are just going to do their things, And when you're going around trying to explain to people that this is the way it should be, or I want you to be like this, or so forth and so on, you have an agenda for the world. And what Eastern spirituality is, the three great traditions, they're about getting rid of that agenda and allowing the world to be as it is. And knowing that if you want to make true change in the world, you can only change what you have.
Yeah.
And what we all have is an internal universe. We all have an internal universe that we can change, or we can understand any moment that we choose, you know. And that's why people feel a great bliss and great joy from when they go from it's out here to in here, because then you start to really work on the deeper levels and you start to see the fruit of your labor, so to speak, you know.
What's really worrying around the world in these modern days is that everyone is so busy, like always engaging with something outside, like on the phone. We are always looking in the social media, constantly feeding ourselves with information and entertainment, and which is actually infinite. It's never ending, and we have all the time in the world for that, but we can't spare a minute for ourselves.
Yeah.
And that's why I think at a very individual level, individual happiness is in danger, I think. And that's very worrying, actually. That's why suicide rate is going higher, and anxiety, panic attacks, etc. All these mental illness problems are rising, which is very sad. But at the same time, what each individual can do is to counter that, is that just spare a little moment a day, just concentrate on yourself and focus on your own mind. Are you happy or sad, or, you know, are you at a good place inside? And if you are, and enjoy it, enjoy the state of mind if you are in a happy state of mind. Otherwise, spare a moment and just to give a little bit of a silence within your mind, and that can just transform your mood, your day. If we can do it every day, that could transform our life in the long run. And that's why it's just looking within ourselves is very important. And I think it's more important than ever around at this time, in modern time.
No doubt.
Yeah.
No doubt. Yeah, well, we're caught in this kind of cult of comparison in the modern world. And social media fuels this, right? Social media fuels big time this cult of comparison, where we might see someone's life, because our focus is oriented towards the external world. We think that that's who we are, should be out there. So we're attached to this image of ourselves in a world. And what you're mentioning is that if we come, there's no image. You're coming back and you're just trying to understand who I am. None of us were taught from birth about who we are. We're taught about how we should function in a social world, and how we should attain riches and success in that social world. We're not taught about, but wait up, who's the subject here? You're telling me about what I should do and who I should be, but who am I? I mean, this is the question that is just avoided. And it's because we have an ignorant perspective of the world, you know. The ignorance, as they talk about in Vedanta, is the ignorance of that inner world, the ignorance of Brahman, is what the ignorance is. They're not saying that you're just an ignorant person. You're just ignorant by nature, because you're not looking in here. You're looking out here, and you're thinking that happiness is going to arise from out here. You're thinking that the great riches are going to happen from out here. But there's not much that you can use from out here. You know, obviously we can acquire wealth and we can get food, and, you know, those simple needs we can acquire from out there. But that doesn't fulfill our spiritual needs. And it's like that quote in Fight Club with when Brad Pitt as the illusionary Tyler Durden went on that rant, and he was saying our great war is a spiritual war. And it's a really, I mean, if any of you guys watch the movie, go out and check it out. But that quote and that scene is very poignant, because he's explaining that we have all of this now. We have the cars, you know, like what psychologists say now, like the way that ordinary people live now was beyond a billionaire back in the 20s. Do you know what I mean? But we're still complaining. We have all the food we want. We have fridge, which, you know, a fridge is not that common to the human species. It's only been around for who knows how long. And the way we're living now is pretty much like a big fat cat, but we're still not content, still not happy. And that's because, as Brad said in Fight Club, our great war is a spiritual war. And it's a war we're trying to reclaim our mind somehow, because culture has stolen our mind and is basically, in some sense, abusing our soul, our Atman, not soul, but it is abusing our soul too. It's abusing our jiva, but it's abusing our true nature, like
at a deeper level.
At a deeper level. And so we have to try and minimize a lot of that stuff. You know, a lot of people now, because of, like I call it the cult of comparison, social media, is because, you know, people look at Instagram, they look at Facebook or Twitter, especially ones like Instagram, where they look at the images of people, especially famous people, and instantly, because of our survival psychology in our mind, when we see someone who is in a higher position of wealth and status, our mind, because of our evolutionary needs, begin to admire them and, in a sense, try to mimic them.
And also we kind of project what we lack.
Exactly. Exactly. That's right. We project what we lack. And that's a good point. And so we don't lack anything. That's the point. That's what your point is, right? We have it all in here. But the lack is this, the fame, the respect from others, the possessions. I don't have that house, I don't have that car, I don't have that woman or that man. I don't have that adulation from people. And that adulation from people that even famous people have is very empty. It's based on the cult of comparison. It's based on what you're talking about, the lack. It's based on the lack. They are admiring those people because they feel that they lack what that person has, the qualities that they have, the fame that they have.
That's actually a very sick mind, isn't it?
It's a sick mind, yeah.
We are all victim of it.
All of us are, yeah.
Yeah, it's very unhealthy for ourselves.
Just ask a psychiatrist or a psychologist. They know, because they're on the front line dealing with depression, anxiety, and suicide. And they will tell you that the cult of comparison, this comparing your life to others, this constant comparison, is killing people. And it is a sick mind. It's not just our intuition about it. It's medically proven to be a sick mind. You know, that if you're out there and you're scrolling the social media feed and you're looking for, you know, what other people are doing, or you're looking for attention from others, then you're caught in this world of comparison, which it does two things. It evokes a lack of things that people don't have, and it also evokes vanity, where people, you know, a lot of people do call the metrics on social media, they call them vanity metrics, right? So they're, you know, how many likes did he get? How many shares did she get? You know, and this all becomes pretty nutty, you know, and that'll definitely keep you away from the deeper levels of reality, the deeper spiritual levels. And like you were saying, with this go-getter attitude, people nowadays are thinking that we need to go out and get the world. We need to go out and grab success. But no one can define what this success means. Even the people who become successful stay in that loop of chasing that. you know,
Yeah.
where it's kind of funny because you see a lot of people who don't say they don't have money, right? They don't have money or adulation, and you ask them, if you got to a stage of wealth of $2 million, what would you do? I just drop off the map. Because that's a different psychology, right? That's a psychology that, I have enough now just to live my life and I don't have to chase my tail, so to speak. But then you see these extremely wealthy people who get way beyond $2 million and they're continually chasing their tail. And they become addicted to that hustle. There's a phrase out there, it's called hustle porn. So it's like this new trend that's happening, as we both know, with entrepreneurship and this and that. All the ads you see on YouTube, right, and a lot of the YouTube content is this hustle porn where they're trying to stimulate you with going out there and getting it and this and that. And then what those people who are promoting that don't understand is not everyone's like them.
That's true.
You know, it's very anecdotal. It's their personal story.
And that works for some people, and it completely destroys some people.
Exactly.
But again, the problem is that whatever they're promoting is as if for everybody, and a lot of people are quite unaware of themselves and how things work, so they just take fully on board, which is not their fault. It's very good that they're trying something, but once they just try those things out fully, but they end up burn themselves out.
Yeah. They don't sleep enough, they don't eat well, they don't, all of these things that are the fundamentals of life that you take for granted.
Yeah.
Because you're caught in hustle porn. And then you're chasing your tail, and then you drop dead. You know, and this is the worst case scenario, right? So, again, this comes to understanding yourself, understanding the way you are, your biology, your psychology, and finding your own way in life. Not everyone's way up the mountain, so to speak, is the same path. For example, you and I, every time we tried the hustle and the grind, we're just like, forget about that. It's not our cup of tea. We're much more shanti people. We like to meditate, read, study, enjoy a cup of tea like now. Just very simple, quiet life, you know, and that's what we have an aptitude for. Some people do like to hustle, and that's all good. We need people like that too. But we're creating this world where everyone's, like Lane Bouton said, like it's becoming a world psychology that is similar to America, where America is based on this idea of going out and getting the world and the American dream and have it and this is, you know, obviously a lot of Americans don't fall for that, but that is promoted, you know, and that's becoming, because of social media and because of media in general, that's becoming the psychology of a lot of people. That's why, you know, for everyone who's listening, when you do hear someone who's saying that, you know, you need to go out and hustle and grind and this and that, you know, it's their own personal perspective of life. It's not for everyone, you know. And most of the cultures that you and I know, when we're in Nepal, India, northern Thailand, these areas that we love to go, the people are very humble and they're not go-getters. And what you see with those people is they're very psychologically sane and they have such a pure heart. And that's why it breaks our heart when we're around them, because like it just showcases that this heightened lifestyle that people are trying to live is way away from what nature is.
That's right.
Way away.
And those people who are in a grounded level, like those people, are the one who holding the world together.
Exactly.
In
the end, exactly. They're the foundation of the world, because that's the foundational psychology.
Yeah.
That humility, that compassion, that forgiveness that those people naturally have are the building blocks of society. Without that, there is no hustle. You know.
It is excessive information and knowledge that overflowing in the internet will serve us in a certain way, but also it'll destroy us in very bad way as well. That, like we've been talking about, if we project ourselves onto these famous people, and we rather getting good energy from that, more so we project our own fault and what we lack towards those people, so we end up feeling more depressed and self-pitiful, and
Yes.
But that's why looking into ourselves and acknowledging our inner problems, addressing them, and recognizing them is just, it's just so crucial.
Crucial, yes.
Yeah.
It is so crucial. Well, if we don't, we're all just going to become hustlers, and we're never going to look within. We're just going to be out there accumulating stuff. Like the story that Muji said that time when the businessman's on the bed and he's selling his watch. Like, look at this, Rolex.
Yeah, on
He's
his deathbed.
on his deathbed, and he's still in business. He's still open for service. And this is our mentality. We're still open for service until the day we die. We're still scheming, and this is completely against the Eastern spiritual systems. They're about, you got to close the shop, shut the doors. It's over. It's done. You out there bartering and trying to promote yourself as a certain person and this and that, it's all finished. It's over. Because that's not where you'll find bliss. That's not where you'll find yourself either. You're not going to find yourself in the marketplace. You're going to find yourself on the meditation cushion.
Yeah.
You know, you're not going to find yourself out there.
You gotta get in there.
You got to get in there.
Get in there.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Like, we gotta go to a marketplace to get something. Same thing. Gotta get in there to find out what the hell's wrong with me.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Basically.
exactly. So you got to work on that deeper level. You know, and that's where, if people start to intellectually study Eastern spirituality, for people who are in the hustle, then they will get an attraction then to deeper practices. It doesn't always work that way. Sometimes you get thrown into meditation, or you have an ayahuasca experience or something like this, and then you're thrust into the spiritual world, the world of spirituality. So, you know, it's what's a good thing is that we're seeing some spiritual elements being incorporated into business, but it's kind of like a footnote in the business. You know what I mean? It's like, we have that there too. We have like a meditation room, and it's not really focused. Because, for example, as you and I know, is that even if you practice 20 minutes of meditation a day, it's still not enough for deep transformation. It's like the Shaolin master Shi Heng Yi was saying that if you want to practice Qigong Tai Chi and you want to make ground, 20 minutes ain't going to do. He said it's an hour at minimum. He's saying an hour in the morning, hour midday, hour twilight, evening, evening time. So if you're really dedicated to these practices, you've got to go deep. I'm not saying you need to meditate 3 hours a day, but meditation for 30 minutes to an hour, or 45 minutes is probably a sweet spot for people. And then probably incorporating that twice a day, one before bed too. And then you'll start to see the transformative experiences. And this again reflects the hustle mentality, right? Oh, meditation is good. We'll fit it into the day. Just 20 minutes. 20 minutes, we can fit 20 minutes. You know what I mean? See, this fits the hustle psychology. It's like when people say, I'm going to take up reading, and in their lunch break, their mind's been riddled with problems and that all morning. I'm going to read for 20 minutes now at lunch. You can't even get your mind into the book because the attention residue on your mind from what you just experienced is so strong that you're not going to be able to even remember what you're reading. You're just reading words, trying to assimilate it. It's better just to do nothing for that half an hour or whatever you have for a lunch break.
Yeah, probably better to just give your mind a little bit of break.
Exactly.
Than put even more in.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
I mean, it's horrific. You know, like with anything, like reading, for example, is best done in the morning, oftentimes, because if you're lucky enough not to have a job or any sort of obligation in the morning time after meditation or whatever practice you do, you get into a scripture or a book that you're reading and then you can go deep. But if you read that towards the end of the day when you've accumulated a lot of, you know, your mind has been overstimulated through the day, then it can be difficult, unless you've had a few, like an hour break before so or something like this. The mind is not like a digital program. It's analog, and I think that people in the modern day don't appreciate that. That's why in our hustle psychology, we're just trying to fit things in the day. We're ticking boxes.
Yeah.
We're ticking boxes. Oh, I read that book. But did you really read that book? Because really reading the book is like really absorbing it and taking notes and learning from it. You know, a lot of people, as you know, I get a lot of emails and they say, how do we learn what you've learned and this and that? And it's like, well, you've got to really absorb yourself in it. You don't just read a book and just throw it away. You dive in, you study it. You have to have that inquisitive mind where you want to get to the bottom of this.
I think we really need to have that real, sincere desire to learn something. Like the desire that you fully want to dedicate this for long period of time. If without that, it's just going to be like just ticking boxes. You know, it'll just be one of the many lists that you need to do each day. And in that way, it's probably better off not doing it, actually.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, because you shouldn't fill your life up too much for that stuff, because in the end, you'll become what you were talking about earlier. You become like a bit of a nutcase, you know, like, because your mind has no time to settle. The mind's not a calculator, man. You can't just throw information in it and think that it's going to assimilate it. You know, you need good sleep to consolidate memories. You need all of these things that are going to help you to understand things at a deeper level. And this is why, you know, like when students at university, when they're at university, the students who often sleep the most often have the best grades, because they're focusing just on learning what they're learning, but they're also getting enough time to consolidate memories and stuff like that. They're not throwing all of these things in, plus creating YouTube videos and all of these other things, accessories. Then, sure, there's some anomalies. Yeah, there's some people that can do that, but it's a minority. Majority of us are just ordinary people, average people, and there's nothing wrong with that. But the ones the average among us that become great are the ones that just who have an ease and a settled mind in their life, and don't fill their plate up too full of too many things.
Yeah, we need to simplify our lifestyle.
Simplify our lifestyle, yeah. It's true.
Yeah. So we always need to create that space within ourselves so that we can feel that space too.
Of course.
Then empty it out again and fill it again. And
exactly, yeah.
That's how we can all grow, like space it out and put something new in and grow from it and then empty it out again. And yeah, we need to simplify our daily lifestyle.
Exactly.
We can't keep doing ticking boxes.
No, of course not.
Yeah.
Of course not. Well, you know, a lot of people want to learn too many things these days. And there's a lack of appreciation of the expert or the craftsman. When just 20 years ago, there was an appreciation of the expert and the craftsman. Social media has done many things to us where we think that we can just learn everything. We think we are a computer, and it's like, no, you can't. Like, you need to, like, simplify it, like you said, and focus on a certain area or whatever it is that you're interested in, or whatever you have an aptitude for, and focus on that and see where that takes you. You know what I mean? Because life, the Tao has a way of allowing your life to move gracefully if you follow something that you're sincere about.
That itself is an adventure, I think.
It's an adventure, yeah, of course. Well, look at you and I just simply being, in the beginning, having an interest in Eastern philosophy, and following it to where we are now. You know what I mean? We've been here, there, and everywhere. Many great experiences, met many wonderful people, learned many fantastic things. It's transformed our lives for the better, you know.
Given us so much rich experience from traveling around many countries, meeting amazing people, and keep learning, and
There's not an end to it. There's not an end to it. You're just enjoying the journey. The destination is the journey, you know, to sound like a cliche. Sorry for the cliche, you know, but that's the way it is, you know. So yeah, all of that accumulation, all of that overstimulation of the mind is going to always eclipse people's true nature. You know, there was a statistic out there, I think Eric Schmidt, who was the CEO of Google, was saying that the amount of information or something we have in like 1 year or something is the amount of information people would accumulate in a lifetime just not so long ago, you know, because we're absorbing so much information, which is actually keeping us away from our true nature, because we're up in our intellect, we're up in our intellectual mind, and we're solving problems, we're trying to understand situations, and we're not just allowing ourselves to just be and have that space like you were talking about in our everyday life. We don't appreciate space anymore. We don't appreciate it. And that's why in Taoism they have all of those analogies about the space within the cup, the space within the house, and so forth and so on. You know, what is valuable.
Space in the universe.
Space in the universe, yeah. Because it contains everything else, right? The space within the universe contains everything else. What makes it the foundation of the universe. Likewise, when Lao Tzu's mentioned in the cup, what's more valuable, the space within the cup or the cup itself? Well, obviously it's the space within the cup. It's a different orientation about what has value. And so when you take that mind cup analogy and you put it to your life, what is valuable in my day? Well, if I don't have space within my mind and I don't have space within my day, then good luck to the day, you know, because everything else that you will do and you'll experience will be from an overstimulated perspective. Your jiva's on fire. It's just like vibrating like this, you know. Your ego is just out there. It's hunting. It's searching for experience and searching for validation from life, you know.
Yes.
Searching for validation of its own existence when the ego itself doesn't exist.
Yeah, it's very contradictory.
Contradictory, yeah. But that's how our mind thinks. Yeah, so all that information is just filling your samskara level. It's filling your subconscious and creating new tendencies, new habits. And then people say, well, how do I get myself out of this? And, well, first of all, you've identified with what is not real. You've identified with a persona system that it's time bound. It's temporary. And you need to identify with which is permanent, you know. So getting back to our original discussion about the soul, it was like, if we say what is the soul, well, the soul is the persona system, and in a sense it's temporary, you know, because from an Eastern spiritual perspective is that the individual themselves, you don't truly exist. You exist temporarily. You exist you are a vessel for the spirit to experience the world, in some sense. Spirit being here, the Atman or the Shunyata or whatever, you know, that undifferentiated place. And so the irony is when you come back into contact with that, you can begin then to enjoy life much more freely. And that's the idea of the Zhuangzi's free and easy wandering, is when you come back to that seeing from spirit, when you come back to this, when you reside in the still point of the Tao, then your life is free and easy. There's no boundaries or image that you're living up to, you know. You've got rid of the image within your mind of yourself. basically. And usually when you have an image of your mind within yourself, that also requires boundaries. Oh, that's not accepted over here. No, that's not accepted there. This is just a byproduct of the jiva, of identifying just totally with your persona system. And so spiritual work is about destroying those boundaries and also working on that deeper level. Again, this is the thing, like we always talk about. The ego doesn't completely exist. You exist in the sense that the ego is a function of communication in the world, it's a function of interaction, which, we need.
Yeah.
You and I, we're having an interface now, right? Because we both have an ego. And so does everyone else, and so does your master, and everyone has an ego. But there's a difference between having an ego and being hostage to the ego. And what we've been talking about in this podcast is basically majority of people in the world are hostage to their ego because they're trying to live up to an image that they have in their mind that's usually been built by society or culture, or their parents or their friends, or whatever they think is acceptable to the status quo. And you are a hostage to that. You're a prisoner to your own mind. And that free and easy wandering that Zhuangzi is talking about is that you've opened the gates up, you've opened the prison up, and you're just moving effortlessly through life with no boundaries. You can accept the world for what it is, but most importantly, you can accept yourself, even your egoic state, your egoic personality.
I think that even realizing you are hostage of your own ego itself is very difficult and can be a long process, because everyone has different experience in life and different tendencies and different upbringing, character, etc. Each individual's experience is very unique of its own. So whatever people suffer from, they have to sort that out somehow.
Yes.
From going to see someone, or just expressing it to friends or close people, or just through spiritual practice such as hatha yoga, meditation, tai chi. So we have to go through that psychological process just to be able to understand where our own existence stands in the world. That work has to be done first. Then we'll be able to be free from it. Then we can kind of then let go of that hostage, that just realization of that you were the hostage. But I don't think it's not many people find it easy to do that. It's not an easy job, I don't think.
No, of course not.
So, only that we easily say they are let it go, but that let it go is, if you don't really understand what goes into let it go, is kind of an empty statement.
Yeah. If you have no guidance and you have no understanding, yes, it's...
Yes.
Because we can say let it go to someone, and that can be also psychologically insensitive to that person.
Well, that's right.
And you see that a lot in spiritual circles, where they'll tell you to let it go, and it's like, well, maybe that person has had a traumatic experience that needs to be worked out. But there's also the other extreme of that, where people can be drama farmers and...
Well, yeah, there's a lot of the cases that individual probably not really willing to let it go.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's why they're a drama farmer, right?
That's their personal problem.
Yeah.
Well, they have to change that eventually for themselves, first and foremost.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we need to address all these things. And then once we can liberate ourselves from being our own hostage, from our own ego, then we can truly be free from it.
Yeah.
Then we'll have that bigger perspective of world and ourselves and the place within ourselves, our own existence. Yeah.
You become the genuine person,
Yes.
the Genren in
Yeah.
Taoism, or in the Zhuangzi. You become the Genren, where you become a real individual, so to speak. You know, you've stopped projecting your stuff onto the world, your mind stuff that you've accumulated. You've just went, I've cleaned out the closet. I've cleaned out the basement's a better analogy. And it's empty now. It's empty. I don't have anything to project on the world. I'm not vexed by what's happening in the world. I'm living as part of the world. And I'm experiencing it without any projection of how the world should be. I've stopped imposing my mentality on how the world should be to accord to who I am, because there is no who you are then. You know what I mean?
That's right.
You've loosened the grip on it. You know, it's like what they say in Vedanta. It's not the identity itself that's the problem. It's the belief in the identity.
Yes.
I believe I'm this person.
Yes.
Well, good luck when you're dying, because that person's going away quick smart. And if you don't learn that while you're living, then it's going to be tough to die. That's one of the points of Eastern spirituality. If you can't die well, it's because you're holding on to that who you are. Dying well means you've let go of who you are.
It's a feeling that we want to get to, is that we belong just from being who we really are. Instead of we try to chase this image of ourselves, and that journey is not easy.
Yeah.
And we start blaming other things, other people, criticize the world and whatnot. But that's not going to get us anywhere, really.
No.
It's about to have that feeling of sense of that we belong from just being who we truly are. And we have to focus on ourselves to get to that stage.
You don't need makeup. Never needed makeup. Psychological makeup in this sense. You just don't need it.
Yeah.
You don't need it. You, as you said, you need to be as you are, and being as you are, in being as you are, you understand you belong.
Yeah.
The irony is, the further we go out here, the less we feel we belong.
Yeah, that's right.
Do you know what I mean? Oh, I want the respect of others. I want to look a certain way. I hope people think I'm beautiful, or think I'm a respected individual. You're a hostage to what the world thinks of you. And the irony is, you're a hostage just to your ego, because that's your ego's perspective of what should happen out here. When you need to be, as you said, as you are, and when you are as you are, then you feel that sense of belonging to the world. You don't have an axe to grind anymore.
Yeah.
You know.
You don't have to do these extra work to please other people or society.
You will truly have blunted your sharpness, as Lao Tzu said. You will have blunted your sharpness, because too many people are sharp when they're living out in this world. They're living, projecting themselves out here. Their attitude becomes different. That go-getter mindset becomes different, where you're trying to acquire something from something or someone else. And you're just going further and further away from your true self. You're just going out. It's the whole analogy on an individual level of the 10,000 things, you know what I mean? 1 became 2, 2 became 3, and 3 became the myriad of form, like the 10,000 things in the Tao Te Ching. That's an experience that we have on an individual level. We were wholly and complete in resonance with the Tao, but then next minute, 1 become 2, 3, and then our mind is, it's out there.
Yeah, out there.
And it's hard to rein that in if your mind's fully out there, as you said, you can say to someone like that maybe an individual like that might have a traumatic experience, and you say to them, just let it go. It's a little bit insensitive. Sometimes people in that situation need to hear just the straight dope. I mean, you have to have a very intuitive feeling in that moment of what that person needs. So we all do need to learn how to let it go, learn how to let ourselves go, so we can live. The old phrase, let go and let God, is one of the phrases. So, meaning, let go of yourself to let the ultimate reality to just enter. And you're a vessel of that. Then you're a limb of Shiva, as they would say. You are just a moving limb of Shiva when the ego has been purged. And we all have that opportunity, But it starts with that work on that jiva. And like what you said, and like what we've talked about a lot in this podcast, is that you can't just say, when you understand the science of the jiva and you understand karma, vasanas and samskaras, it's hard to say, just let it go, because they have to themselves work also on those levels. Okay, what is my common unconscious reactions in the world that are driven by my samskaras? I was like that. Okay, so what do I need to do to rein that in? I need to practice. I need to start to look more inside than being affected by what's happening out here.
You really need to step back and look deeply into it, closely.
And there can be a process to that. It's not just something that you can just get like this. Sure, there's some people with an aptitude that can just have it just like this, and it's all well and good. But the majority of us need time to marinate our mind in that space. We need to marinate our mind in that space, and then the space begins to inform your character. That's what's important. See, you marinate in it, and then next minute, because you have that, you are identifying, you're abiding. That's a better word. More in the space. That begins to inform your habits and your tendencies and your actions going forward. And the more you're abiding in that space, the more transformative, or the more transformations will happen within your samskaras.
Yeah, you're allowing yourself to change. Make the move.
Make the move, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's hard, as you said, to make the move when someone just says you need to let it go. You have to have a pretty high spiritual intuition just to let it go on that instant. Usually we need a roadmap, or we need some sort of practice to alleviate certain things about ourselves. Otherwise we become like the spiritual fool, as Ken Wilber would say. You become a spiritual fool because you might be highly skilled in Zen, for example. He used Zen as an example, but you haven't done any psychological work. So you've done thousands of hours of Zazen, but then, someone says something to you and you're just like, you
kind of snap,
you know what I mean? So, and sure, look, we're all human. There can be those situations, but when you see that too often with someone like that, then you're like, oh my God, this guy's tough nut. And what's he meditating for? Who knows? But that's what happens, right? So, and that brings us back to the integral one, as they talk about in Taoism, is that that good blend of intellect and intuition, that cusp. What they call in Western esotericism, they call intellectual intuition, is the terminology they use. And usually that intellectual intuition is on the cusp of time and eternity, they say. So that's like that A of eternal, that Latin scholastic word, A of eternal, where you reside on that cusp of eternity and time. So samsara and nirvana, that's where the integral being lives. Maybe that Zen monk that Wilbur was talking about was just all intuition. He's just all meditation, all this and that. There's no intellect. There's no discernment. So when someone steps on his foot and he karate chops them, that's just that's just that's he doesn't have an intellectual faculty. And if you understand psychology, cognitive science, and the esoteric schools of Eastern philosophy, then you understand that there's got to be a balance there. There's no extreme. There should be no extremes. There should be moderation. And doesn't mean that we overcompensate for the intellect. That's what a lot of people think. And what they try to emphasize in Taoism. It doesn't mean that you just start getting a library of books and you just, reading all day long. And, that's kind of, you could almost say that the use of the intellect is very sparse in comparison to our natural intuitiveness. And it is when you look at your day, you look at your interactions, you look at what you're doing, how you're relaxing and stuff like this. It's all very intuitive. There's not much intellect involved.
Yes.
When there's reading involved, of course, there's intellect involved. And when there's solving problems, there's intellect involved and stuff like that.
Yes, of course, yes.
You know.
Yeah, intellectual work can give us good framework and understanding. And intuitive work allows us to have experience of that.
Yes.
Yeah. Like meditation is an experience. That's an experience that we get to have. But then intellectual work can address what that experience was about.
Exactly.
And then you that was that. Now I can kind of connect dots.
Exactly.
You have deeper understanding. When we can repeat over and over again in all fields of knowledge, then that's how we can grow intellectually and intuitively.
Exactly. Well, that's why in all the great traditions there's a balance of theory and practice. And that's an understanding of how the human mind is. Being a higher state of consciousness that we are, we're no disrespect to a dog, but we're a higher state of consciousness than what a dog is. Even though a dog has their emotional faculties way more open than what we have as humans, but we have this ability to understand the nature of the universe, understand the nature of ourselves. The dog doesn't really have that. Dog may just be living that, who knows? We don't really know the nature of a dog's experience because we're not dogs. But yeah, so we have that. There is that element of theory and practice that's always a core in spiritual practice. In spiritual traditions.
Yeah.
So you need to have a healthy balance of doing and non-doing. There's always this balance, and it doesn't mean that we spend the same amount of time on one or the other, as I was mentioning with intellect and intuition. It means that there has to be the right allocation of resources for one, either or, you know what I mean? So, like the chocolate milkshake analogy that I use, if you put half chocolate powder and milk in a blender, it's going to be quite a mess. You need to have that right balance of a few, teaspoons and the right amount of milk.
Yeah.
And that's the analogy,
That's right.
There's got to be that fine balance of theory, but coupled with extensive practice, allowing the intuition to assimilate what you've learned. The subconscious does work things out, but it needs time to work it out. If you're studying books all day long and you're only allocating the subconscious time to consolidate knowledge and memories and sleep, it's not going to be enough.
Yeah, that also gets deep and over different experience in life too.
Yeah.
So we have to give ourselves enough time to assimilate all this knowledge as well, not just try to get the result.
No, of course not.
It doesn't really work like that. We're not machine. We're manual. We need time.
We need time.
Yes.
And we have time.
Yes.
I mean, the hustle psychology has taught us that we don't have time, but we have a lot of time.
Yes.
A lot of time. And if you sleep a lot, then you'll have a lot more years than those who don't sleep a lot.
True, that's right.
So
You can
prolong your life. So, that's the science behind that. But anyway, that's when we talk about the soul, that's the nature of the soul. The nature of the soul is something, in the East, it's not something that goes to some sort of mystical abode. You won't be that person after death. You won't be playing table tennis with George Washington and Muhammad Ali. You'll likely be, the energy of your jiva will go to the next vessel that is suitable for that, because energy moves to where there's an attraction. And so whatever the energy within your jiva there is, that it's going to move to the next vessel that is. I don't know if it's on this planet. I don't know enough about that. Not on this planet or another planet maybe. Who knows? But yeah, the goal for us is to cleanse that samskaras out. So then the jiva then loses its power. You've in a sense erased that individual soul, and then you begin to align with the cosmic soul. But it's not even a soul, it's an undifferentiated consciousness.
Yes.
Soul. This is why soul is a bad word to use in Eastern spirituality, and it's a word that probably shouldn't be used.
Yeah.
We should be familiarize ourselves with the terminology of jiva and atman, or shunyata or Tao, and genuine person, and we should familiarize ourselves with this sort of terminology.
Yes.
Because soul is, when we think of soul, we're thinking of, someone who's going to go to heaven or hell, and
Not quite clear.
it's not quite clear.
Not quite clear.
And it's too much of a movie idea. It's a fantastic idea, and there's not much science behind it. Where when we look at the science of reincarnation and we look at the science of the jiva, then you see that there's a system there that makes sense. If you're not cleansing this out, then it's going to move on, and it's going to move to whatever body is suitable. Taoism talks about the same thing. Buddhism and Hinduism, of course, they talk about the same thing. So you're not aligning with what's true. And this is what's so important for everyone that's listening, and you and I personally, is that if we're true about what we're doing and we're following this practice and we understand it truthfully, then the dedication has to be on cleansing that soul to realize that your true nature, which is the Atman or the Shunyata or Tao, call it whatever you will, the essence of the universe, the irreducible essence of the universe, which is what you are. So we just have to cleanse that out, cleanse that jiva out, so we can experience the world as it is, without our egoic perception of how the world should be. And the way that we don't return, so to speak, in this cycle of samsara is once we've cleaned that out, then there's no energy of samskaras or vasanas ready to cling to another body. And you go through that process that they talk about in Tibetan Buddhism, where you go into the first stage when you're in the pure, it's like purgatory, where you're in that pure non-dual reality, you're experiencing it and there's a lot of joy. But then that energy starts to grab you, and then you go to the second phase. Second phase you can still get out of if you have enough spiritual training. But then the karma is clinging. Oh, but what about, yeah, damn, and then next one, once you get into the third phase, then you go straight into a womb. That's the idea in the Tibetan Book of the Dead. So, which is, if we look at them as the experts on death, then we need to take notice of what they're saying. So, but that corresponds to other traditions too. So that's basically what our role is, isn't it? Our role is to not have to go through the two other phases. Is that if we cleanse that jiva out, we have no attachment to the world at death, then we're absorbed in the greater totality. Yeah. Because that's our true nature. There is
long journey.
Long journey. There is no. The person doesn't exist.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the truth. And I know that we can, always make counter arguments to that. But when we look, as you mentioned in the last podcast about the peeling of the onion, when we keep looking, there's just nothing there. That person that you're looking for doesn't exist. And the more you go into that, the more you feel that bliss. And that's truly our true nature, and that's the path for all of us. It may be long for some, it may be short for others. But what we need to realize is that we just need to get on that journey. We need to take up the journey and start walking the path. And then and only then can we truly understand the nature of ourselves and the world. So, all right, I think that's a good place to stop. So,
yeah, I think so.
All
Great.
right, so, all right, guys, thanks for watching. Remember, make sure you like, subscribe, and check out my Patreon page. And yeah, hope you guys enjoyed, and we'll see you guys in the next podcast.